A true gentleman leaves no puzzle unsolved. Hello, everyone, welcome, and I hope you will welcome Professor Layton into my room. Some people have already noticed that Mr. Professor Layton has been hanging out on the shelf with Kanji and some of my other little plushy things. I got him at the Utah Comic. I got him at the Utah Comic Con, and so he will be joining me on the shelf there as we talk about Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Now, I gave a full suppressions on this before I went to Comic Con, and I finished it while on my trip to Utah. So, well, I technically finished it in Utah, not during the plane ride. Don't get a misunderstanding though. But, so what do I think about the final package? So, first thing, the game, essentially, if you count the beginning trial, if you're considering Phoenix Wright's into the bargain, there's only 4 trials throughout the entire game. And like I said in my first questions, it does a pretty decent job of incorporating elements from both games and trying to kind of compensate the other side's player base if they haven't necessarily played the other franchise before, like how many of the puzzles allow you to use the buttons and only a few really require you to use the touchscreen. That's compensating a little bit, because like with the Phoenix Wright games, they've always complemented both styles. You could use the entire touchscreen, or you could use buttons only, or you could do a hybrid. So it really does a pretty nice job of complementing that. And my initial thought with Professor Layton's puzzles, like I said, feeling kind of easy, I kind of feel like that still, even though with the game done now, I still kind of feel a lot of puzzles were made easier to compensate the new the control scheme. And there are a few puzzles that kind of repeated a few times, which I know that happens in Professor Layton games. But say like the maze puzzle where you're just going up and down different maze levels, that's not really much of a puzzle. That's just endlessly wondering. I mean, worst case scenario, you're wandering around the maze until you go the right path. Worst case scenario, you beat it in like 5 seconds because you guessed which. There was no real thought process. It's not like you're getting a preview of a layout or anything, or one attempt to go through it or anything. It's just a guessing game because you don't get any of that. Those kind of puzzles bother me in that. I mean, it's not bad to have one, but I think there were like 4 of them I did. It's just, So the puzzles, there are some good puzzles, but I don't think you're gonna wrap your head around them as much as some of the other Professor Layton titles. Now, my complaint with the mob mentality, like, I really like the mob mentality still in the end, but the aspect where you can use those statements against each other turned out to be the worst case scenario, I thought, in my first impressions video, that it just constantly tells you. You'll hear them go, oh, and it's like, they'll muddle something when somebody else, and when you look around, you can like one guy spins around, others will be like, they give clear visual, and get with the sound cue, and like, I don't mind them being somewhat obvious, but it would have been really interesting to have 1 or 2 these witnesses maybe show very lesser signs, like maybe like if one usually is like this, and maybe at some point he's kind of like, I don't know, the aspect reminds me of a power justice system of looking for a spot without doing a real close look on them. But the sound cue just makes it obvious. It just seems to be... It makes it feel like it's just more chatter instead of trying to really look for a way to continue your case. And, that has its ups and downs. On, a negative way you can look at that is if that didn't exist, I'd be pulling my hair out trying to ask every fucking person in the mom trying against each statement there. I mean, there's good and bad. I kind of would have liked being able to look at them more and try to figure out who might have some issue or something to comment a little bit. But, that's just my aspect. It can be viewed as a positive, like I said, Without it, some people, if they made it more subtle, would probably spend more time trying to search for it. So, that's a two-sided coin little thing now. Now, the tutorial trial is like a normal Phoenix Wright game, while the other 3 trials are on the witch hunting thing. So, you got all the weird mob mentality and magic and shit to consider in it. Now, the three other cases, necessarily the last 2 cases, are pretty much the big meat of the game. And you could actually argue the last case kind of goes through a whole bunch of weird moments, so it has a lot of odd moments. But the conclusion, the grand reveal, and that's saved for the whole story aspect, is where a lot of my problems kind of originate from. They're not in the conclusion, but where they're from is connected to it. And I'll go over that stuff when we reach the story. But overall, for the conclusion itself, I liked the conclusion. It was nice, heartwarming, and that. And I really enjoyed the story and the interaction and the characters and that. Though there ain't, besides, Phoenix and Professor Layton's characters that actually appear in the game, which mostly leans more on Professor Layton, where, like, Edgeworth makes just one small cameo of that. But you get what I mean. They'll them and their partners and that. I mean, none of the new characters really, I doubt, will ever be used in anything or reappear or anything, which is a little shame for a few of them, because a few of them are interesting. And then at another point, some of the interesting ones only get to be shown like once or twice, so there's also a lack of, because like in Professor Layton games, a lot of characters reappear constantly or reused in good ways, in my opinion. There's a lot of familiar characters that either reappear in puzzles, story aspects, and that. I really like that we seeing those characters, even if it's just a small cameo, and I doubt any of these characters will ever be reappeared, because those like 3 of them I really liked it myself, but to be honest, I don't really have a whole lot to add besides my first impressions. It's not a perfect game, but I don't think it's as horrible as some people make it out. It compensates a few elements from each series to allow this weird crossover together. And I got into play a little of the DLC, which I don't know if it's actually DLC. If you're familiar with Professor Layton games, you can get additional puzzles unlocked by connecting to the internet. Well, in the Professor Layton games, they've always actually been on the cartridge. I have a sneaking suspicion the same thing goes for this too, because it didn't really seem like a long download, but either way, it has little mini episodes, and they have basically a little story in them and a puzzle in them. And I only had 3 of them at the time. I think they planned 12, I believe, so I will probably after, I think it's every week that we'll get one, so, it'll be a little while before we get them all. But I'll probably go through that, but I don't think it really is going to add much. But it does take place after the story's conclusion, so it does supposedly add a bit to the story. And they really break the 4th wall a lot. They broke it so much in the 1st episode. So if you're wanting it to be really serious, it's probably not going to be really serious. It really breaks the freaking 4th wall a lot. I don't know if it's going to continue that way, but it did. It did in the 1st episode. So, but besides that, the only thing I really have to talk about is my thoughts on the conclusion story and the things that really bothered me. So I'll try to start with what bothers me, but this will go into minor spoilers. So aside from that, my recommendation is, if you like these franchises, get the game. It's $29. It's not a steep price. I think you get a fair amount of content for what you paid for. aside from that, let's move on. So, my issues. What are my big issues? Well, I already talked about the mob mentality thing in OA. So, but my other issues with the game really dwell in the story. Okay, so by the end of the story, you find out that this really reminds me a lot of the Unwound future in Professor Layton's game. It's basically a giant conspiracy. Everything you're experiencing is a lie. Magic is not real and shit. It's a huge cover up, and you're probably thinking, how the fuck is this even happening then? How basically everyone's hypnotized by the story's ink that he writes, and it causes a higher percentage of it basically being believed and such, thus giving a higher ratio of it happening and things. So people are more suggestive to the idea of whatever the hell they're reading, thus more likely it's going to happen, shit. And everyone who comes to the town is hypnotized in a way to be told that anything that is solid black is invisible. So that explains some of the things that are invisible related in the game. Now he basically has a bunch of minions that will do all the magic and shit for everything, and if it's so involved that they need to knock everyone out, they can ring a silver bell, because there's stuff in the water that for some reason makes people pass out when they hear silver ding ding ding. So if it's so involved they need to knock everyone in the area out, they can ring a bell and do what they need. If it's something simple like set a flame fire, they can, just quick get fire thing here. So it's a really crazy scheme of really delusioning magic in this world. And that's kind of what leads to my issues. And though at the very beginning of the game. So at the very beginning, in the beginning cutscene, and I know this is kind of nitpicking, really, but it just kind of bothers me how it's just left unknown. Because, I can set aside some of my disbeliefs. This whole town is owned by a corporation and stuff and that. But the beginning of the game is away from this corporation, and yet, you have these witches flying. You have a witch break into Professor Layton's building as a board. Well, she didn't break in. She came in as a board and broke out as a witch flying. And then you had the whole thing with the statues and the car. And even if you wanted to call all that remaining hallucinating crap from the ink, which is one argument someone threw at me, but my counter argument is, if that was the case, why the fuck does Professor Layton and Luke see a fucking giant handprint on the car in the tree? And, that doesn't even explain how the car is in the tree. A lot of the beginning things with all this magic kind of get, oh yeah, we're just not going to really explain any of that, but we'll explain everything in the village. Because, what are you saying? All these little minion dudes in black capes and shit? Well, actually, they're wearing purple capes, but, I would assume any of the stuff they don't knock everyone out for, I would assume they're in black capes, since one of them uses it. But, you get my point. Where they all riding, cars and motorcycles that are pure black and shit, and they're, chasing, it's come on, we gotta catch up! Magic's gonna be used, guys! Come on! It's that part, my disbelief, just kinda can't get over that part so much. It's just kinda, yeah. Yeah, my really biggest complaints is just one thing about the mob mentality and the beginning explanations of magic. Those are my biggest complaints about the game, really. And to be honest, those are pretty minor complaints, to be honest. They're not huge complaints at all, in my opinion. The game functions essentially like a Phoenix Wright game. It's not as both aspects aren't as in-depth or insanely hard, but I think the game does a good job. I haven't heard any blind hatred for the game yet from reviews I've seen of it, though I'm sure there are some, but I've only seen 3 reviews. you know, I only really watch people that I see, like, I watch Jared's review of it, and, I mean, most part, people just say the kind of same concept. It's kind of the weaker version of the two games combined together on that. I mean, like I said, it's not perfect, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was silly, it's strange. I don't know if the story bothers me as much, like, I think Unwound Future bothers me more in the story aspect. I mean, I could get a huge, really rich corporation could go through all kinds of insane shit to do something. But the whole thing, like, of Unwound Future, I'm not going to go into it because, you know, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't played it. But, you know, just the end of Unwound Future, I just can't wrap my head about that. That just brings so much construction-related issues into the picture, or even how the sky and shit worked exactly. But it's just... But, anywho, those are my thoughts. I recommend the game. It's only $29. Now, if it was like $60, $50, no, I wouldn't recommend it for that price. I'd probably recommend it for $30. Which, being $29, that seems like a fair giveaway to me. I don't see the big deal. Personally, though, I would have liked it a much better booklet. I would have liked a much better one. Also, how Warrior Warriors ended up doing the same thing that Nintendo did with this, with all the Club Nintendo shit on the back. It's kind of weird. Like I said, it's not necessarily a horrible idea. It's making use. Though, really, I would appreciate if they, you know, like maybe put the code up here and kind of got rid of that, or thinned it out where it's between them or something. You know, because it's where it is right now is where the cartridge is right here. You can see a little bit right there. It's a little inconvenient how it's like that. At least, you know, do something to make the code visible. Spread out the numbers in between the squares or something, you know. Because that's, I mean, like Hyrule Warriors, you know, in the exact same way. The code is, I believe, yeah, it's right here again, right near the bottom of this spot where the game goes. You need to put it somewhere where it's a little more visible. Just a little minor complaint there too, I guess. But overall, I really enjoyed the game. I recommend it, and I would have actually liked to do footage for the game, but I don't have any means of really recording a 3DS tiles aside from using my cam, and I didn't think using the camera for this particular thing would have been that big of a thing, being, you know, more of a visual novel style game. Maybe if I wanted to show actual, like, you know, gameplay actions more, I could get by that, but that's just my minor thoughts on that. Either way, if you have any more questions or anything on the game, please leave a comment down below and I will gladly answer. So thank you for joining me for this video, and praise the sun.